Hey, watch it, Grandpa. This ain't some cheap lake. The sharp voice sliced through the salty air as Marvin's old wooden boat gently bumped against a glossy luxury yacht. The man yelling was young, smug, and holding a half-empty champagne glass. He stood on the polished deck like he owned the entire harbor. Heads turned. Laughter echoed across the marina. Some recorded it on their phones, eager for the next viral moment. But Marvin didn't react. Instead, he raised his hand in a silent salute toward the water. Moments later, something stirred the waves behind him, a massive silhouette cutting through the early mist. As the Navy ship loomed larger, the giggles faded. The crowd stilled. Suddenly, the marina was silent. Respect, it turns out, has a way of arriving unannounced. Marvin Blake, 75, was a retired Navy senior chief who'd lived for decades in a modest dockside community. His boat, the Freedom Light, was worn with age and salt, its paint faded and boards weathered. But it was his sanctuary, a tribute to the years he served and the brothers he lost. Each morning, Marvin took the boat out, not to fish, but to reconnect, with memories that still lived on those waters. When he raised the American flag at sunrise, it was never routine. It was ritual. That particular morning, Marvin was easing the boat into his usual slip when a brisk undercurrent, one he had warned, newer boaters about for years, nudged the Freedom Light into a sleek, gold-accented yacht. The scrape was minor, barely a blemish, but the response from the yacht's owner was instant and loud. Dressed in linen shorts, designer shades, and slicked-back hair, the man shouted, "Do you even have insurance on that thing? You can't just bump into $1 million yacht like it's a bumper boat." Laughter erupted again from his deck guests. One woman lounging in a neon bikini said, not so softly, "Looks like it drifted out of a retirement museum." Marvin, unfazed, calmly, tied off his lines. His hands, though slower now, moved with practiced precision, hands that once pulled wounded sailors from the sea. Another man on the yacht had his phone out, laughing, "And here it is, folks. USS Grandpa crashing into civilians. Hope someone calls the Coast Guard." As Marvin secured his rope, the marina supervisor arrived, clipboard in hand and irritation on his face. "Sir, we've had repeated concerns about your vessel. This dock is meant for modern, compliant boats, not—" "Whatever this is," Marvin's voice remained composed, though the humiliation was palpable. "She's registered. Since 1981, been in this same spot almost 40 years. Well," the manager sniffed, "regulations evolve. Maybe it's time you consider another harbor, something more in line with your equipment." As Marvin stepped onto the dock, someone muttered behind him, "That boat should have been scrapped years ago." He paused. Slowly, he turned and saluted the weathered flag on his stern, a salute crisp and clean, executed with the pride of a man who never forgot what it meant to serve. Then he sat down alone on a bench, gazing out at the horizon, while the laughter behind him carried on. Nearby, a pair of old fishermen watched the scene unfold. They recognized the Navy pin on Marvin's cap, but said nothing. Meanwhile, the young yacht owner, emboldened by his entourage, added fuel to the fire. "He scraped the whole side. Look at that. That thing is a floating hazard. Should be banned." Others at the marina began to gather. Some looked uncomfortable, a few smirked. A young dockhand snapped a picture of Marvin's boat and quipped to his co-worker, "I'm calling this one Battle of the Barnacle Cruiser. Hashtag Antique Fail." Marvin didn't argue. He never did. What did he need to prove to these strangers? Instead, he opened a small wooden case from inside his coat. Inside was his Navy badge, tarnished but clean, and a folded letter bearing the seal of a retired admiral. He ran a fingertip over each word, not to show anyone, but to remind himself who he was before this moment tried to make him forget. A little boy broke from his mother's grip and toddled over. "Mister, were you in the Navy?" "My grandpa was too." Marvin smiled gently. A long time ago, son. The boy's eyes lit up. Did you fight in a war? Marvin nodded. A couple. The mother rushed over, apologetic, gently tugging her son away. Sorry, don't disturb him, she said, glancing at Marvin with caution. But the boy waved goodbye. That simple gesture meant more than a dozen salutes. Back on the yacht, the party resumed. More champagne, more music, more self-congratulation. To yachts that don't crash into garbage barges, someone toasted. The marina manager returned, this time flanked by security. Mr. Blake, I'm afraid the grandfather clause we allowed for your vessel expired last season. We've been meaning to reach out. Marvin stood, stiffly. His right knee ached, an old injury from a mission in a part of the world these people couldn't even place on a map. You've seen me here every day, he said quietly. Sorry, sir. It's nothing personal, the guard added. It never is, Marvin replied. Then came the sound, a low, powerful horn that vibrated in your chest. Heads turned toward the harbor's mouth. Through the fog, a massive gray outline moved like a ghost of steel. Is that a Navy ship? Someone asked. The yacht owner chuckled nervously. What, they here to tow him out? But the ship didn't turn toward the main channel. Instead, it veered gently in the direction of Marvin's slip. As it drew nearer, its towering mast came into view, followed by a loudspeaker voice, clear and direct. Preparing for ceremonial approach, requesting permission to honor retired Senior Chief Marvin Blake. The crowd froze. Phones that had been recording mockery were now raised in reverence. The sleek Navy vessel, identified by its markings as the USS Valor, slowed to a near stop. Sailors lined the deck, standing in perfect formation. The American flag waved high at full mast. A smaller patrol craft launched from its side, cutting cleanly through the water toward the dock. As the yacht owner stepped back, visibly confused, Marvin remained still. He watched with quiet clarity, emotions brewing under the surface like a storm that had been held back too long. 3 officers disembarked from the patrol boat, all dressed, in full ceremonial uniform. Their shoes shined like mirrors, their movements sharp and respectful. The lead officer, a Navy commander with years etched across his ribbons, approached Marvin with precise, dignified steps. He stopped exactly 3 paces from where Marvin stood. Senior Chief Blake, he announced, his voice clear and loud enough for the entire marina to hear. On behalf of the United States Navy, the 7th Fleet, and the Secretary of the Yacht Navy, we are here to acknowledge your service, honor your sacrifice, and deliver a long-overdue salute. Marvin stood slowly, straightening his back. His salute was steady, though his fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from memory. The calm, kind of memory that never fades, only settles deeper, the officer continued, now turning to address the stunned onlookers. This man, he said, gesturing to Marvin, was responsible for saving 19 sailors during a surprise offshore attack in 1970. He maintained communications under fire when his equipment was compromised. He volunteered for missions no one else would. He led men through chaos, then came home quietly without medals or fanfare. That ends today. The yacht owner fidgeted awkwardly, his arms crossed. About the yacht. The damage, he began, his voice barely audible now. The commander turned, his gaze steady but firm. The Navy will cover any damage caused, and will add the price of dignity lost at this dock today to the bill, though I doubt you could afford that. Quiet wave of chuckles and nods rippled through the crowd. This time, not mockery, but agreement. The marina staff, many of whom had looked the other way earlier, now stood behind Marvin in silent solidarity. The young dockhand who'd taken photos earlier lowered his phone. Another officer stepped forward, this one carrying a black folder. Senior Chief, he said, your classified mission records from Operation Midnight Watch have now been fully reviewed and declassified. Your contributions have been confirmed and validated at the highest level." Whispers spread. No one in the crowd knew what that operation involved, but the seriousness in the officer's voice left no doubt that it mattered. From the folder, he removed a plaque bearing the Navy's seal and a letter of commendation signed by the Secretary of the Navy. Alongside it, a second envelope, an official Navy-funded slip reservation at the marina, permanent, with all fees waived for life, paid for by the Veterans Brotherhood Foundation. Gasps filled the air. Even the marina supervisor took a step back, visibly humbled. I didn't know," he mumbled. "You didn't ask," Marvin replied gently, without spite. Then came the final salute. As the USS Valor gave one final horn blast, every sailor aboard raised their hand in unison. Marvin stood firm, returning the gesture. His lips didn't move, but his eyes, red-rimmed and shining, spoke volumes. This wasn't a performance. This was recognition long overdue. A single tear slipped down his cheek, but he didn't wipe it. He let it fall, because that moment wasn't just for him. It was for the ones who didn't make it back, for the voices that went silent on stormy seas, for the names not engraved in bronze, but etched in memory. The crowd remained still, many visibly emotional. Even the once sneering yacht guests now stood with hands over hearts, their cocktails forgotten. Cameras still rolled, but this time they were capturing something genuine. As the officers stepped back, the commander leaned in and said softly for Marvin's ears alone, "That letter you sent, it reached the right people. And your shipmates. They never stopped talking about you, even when the world forgot they didn't." Marvin nodded, overwhelmed. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Within hours, footage of the ceremony began making its way across social media. Headlines exploded. "Veteran humiliated at Marina. Navy responds with full honors." By nightfall, the video had passed 10 million views. By the end of the week, it became national news. Back at the marina, things changed. A brass plaque was mounted beside Marvin's boat slip. It read, "Reserved in honor of Senior Chief Marvin Blake, for service, sacrifice, and silent strength." The marina manager installed it himself and later visited Marvin with a quiet apology, unable to meet his eyes. The yacht owner, to his credit, returned too, this time without entourage or arrogance. He offered to fund a full restoration of the Freedom Light. Marvin shook his hand, accepting the gesture, not out of need, but because he'd learned long ago that peace heals more than pride ever could. He still sails every morning, still raises the flag, still drifts into the quiet corners of the harbor where memories linger and the past feels just a breath away. And sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and still, tourists gather, hoping to catch another glimpse of the moment they saw online. Some swear they hear the Navy horn again, low and distant. Others claim to see the shadow of a ship that's already come and gone. When they ask Marvin if he's expecting another visit, he just smiles and says, "That ship knew who I was before anyone else remembered. That was enough." Because in the end, respect isn't measured in luxury or popularity. It's not found in shiny boats or loud parties. It's measured in sacrifice, in loyalty, in the quiet moments when you stand for something even when no one's watching. Marvin never needed recognition, but when it came from those who mattered. If you believe honor isn't about wealth, but about sacrifice, subscribe to Her Feelings Stories. Because some vessels carry more than people, they carry history.